Hey guys, what's up? It's Friday. Welcome to another edition of The Breakfast Club. I'm sorry for missing last week. I tend to have a bit of a crazy schedule and sometimes I end up missing them. But I wanted to make sure I didn't miss this one. So I'm trying to quickly get this one off, and I'm glad I was able to get this going before I had to rush off to do my other responsibilities. I really did want to get this one done last week, though, because it was right after the election. And the response to the results was rather interesting, wasn't it? I mean, the blue wave apparently did come crashing through, at least for the House of Representatives. And, there's a lot of people happy about that, and there are a lot of people unhappy about that, particularly Trump and those who support him. To say that they are a bit overwrought is an understatement. If you happen to see, like, say, the tweets from the orange one and, certain responses from those conservatives that support him. And I've always found the way they respond to these sorts of things, and in general, just their behavior and the words they use in particular, to be rather interesting, if not morbidly amusing. See, I've noticed over the years that something that, people on the right love to do when they happen to be, labeling those on the left, they tend to try to paint them as a very irate, angry bunch who are prone to acts of violence or inflammatory statements. They always say things like they're going to unhinge society, and they're detrimental to the well-being of the United States, and they're going to be, doing all sorts of things. If they're in power, they're going to do all sorts of things that is going to ruin everything for everyone. And yet, usually when they're in charge, I don't really see an uptick of violence happening, in the streets due to leftist ideology. I don't really see, all sorts of crazy unrest happening. It's not something that, and granted, I'm talking about the United States. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be tons of people, and I'm pretty sure myself included, if I was hearing this, will be pointing out, hey, look, it's not as if, leftist ideologies or people who are ascribed to them haven't committed these sorts of things. I mean, history is full of examples of this. But as far as the United States is concerned, and especially in, I'd say, like, fairly recent times, you don't really see the types of things that they call for. And yet when you happen to look at, when you look at the United States, at least, fairly recently, you look back, don't really see the types of things that the right happens to point, to the left, accuse them of. To put it bluntly, it's not people on the left who are running over people with a car during the middle of a protest. It's not people on the left who are mailing bombs to people they don't like. It's not. It's not people on the left who marry themselves, to regimes and certain organizations that have been proven to be evil and are considered reprehensible by any person with a conscience in this day and age. But there you have it. And it's getting to be so nuts that even conservatives are now beginning to go, okay, enough is enough. This is getting out of hand. And it is. I mean, when you have a president reacting the way he does to any form of opposition, and his supporters acting the way that they do, it doesn't really matter what your ideology is. There has to be something in your mind that says enough is enough. Granted, enough is enough. It's been enough for a long time now. Very long time. If there was any real civility, with average, society, it wouldn't have gotten this far. But it has. So now, with the results of this election, I'm pretty sure people are going to be thinking to themselves, okay, well, now things are going to go in reverse. Hold the phone. There's a good chance of that, yes. And I know, from what we've seen of certain polls, a good portion of the American people, conservatives included, are breathing a little bit easier now that they feel that there's a little bit of a check and balances thing going on, now that the House of Representatives are in the hands of the Democrats. But I would like to point out a couple of things. Number one, the Democrats aren't necessarily our friends either. Granted, yes, when it comes to certain policies, we can say that they're a little bit friendlier to the average American citizen. At least some people will agree with that. But on the other hand, there are things I can point out. Let's just put it this way. When it comes to business, it's not as if they're that much different than the Republicans, save for a few things here and there. But you got to remember, it was under the Obama administration where the financial institutions and the banks that got us into the recession got off clean for the most part. Very few people ended up going to jail. There were no real penalties for what happened, despite the fact that we knew what they did was unconscionable. So, yeah, you have to look at this realistically. You really do. I mean, is it better off that things, that the election went the way it did? Yeah. But don't expect miracles. And the reason why you can't expect miracles, at least from the current, government, is because at the end of the day, it all depends on us. It really does. It all starts at the ground level. And even with what I said about, what you happen to see from people on the right and the things that they're capable of doing, despite the fact that they love to say that the left is capable of it. Yet when I look at death tolls, it's obvious who are the ones going around, who are the more violent ones and the ones who are, taking lives because of certain ideologies. All this is happening at the ground level. Despite what we could say about Trump helping to foster an atmosphere of instability, and that's putting it mildly, it's not as if he's putting the guns in people's hands and telling them straight up to, send bombs to people. And even if he was, it's up to the people to actually go and do that. This stuff happens at the ground level. This stuff happens, at the level that you and I live on. And so if there's going to be any real change, it has to happen at that level. Now, voting, actually going out and putting the right people in government, that's a big step. Yes, that step was taken. Yes. But that's only part of the fight. The rest of it is making sure that we actually act civil towards one another. Try to bring that back. And try to remind people that we're not that much different from each other when it comes to what we want out of life. It's the lunatics that want a little bit differently than what we want from life. I mean, the average person, whether they happen to be conservative or liberal or whatever, they're not exactly wanting genocide, when it comes to different groups of people. They don't necessarily want to see concentration camps of people that look different than them. They don't want to see children being separated from their parents just because of, they happen to be from a different country than our own. You talk to the average person, you realize that there is some sense of decency, going on with them. It's really the nuts that, take things too far. This is not me excusing things that we hear in right-wing ideology, because yes, they happen to have certain dangerous social ideas that can lend to this sort of thing. But just like with, say, somebody following a religion that people could say has been extreme, but yet you look at the average person, they don't necessarily follow the most extreme tenets, the same can be said of political ideology. And when you talk to average people, you begin to realize that we pretty much want the same things out of life, basically. We don't necessarily want, the worst aspects of our nature dictating how society goes. So I think that, again, at the ground level, we need to try to bring civility back when it comes to how we speak to one another, how we talk about each other, how we deal with one another, how we view one another, how we try to come together to solve basic social problems. We need to bring that back. There has to be a push for some real civility, but there also has to be, at the ground level, a sense of wanting to bring accountability back to our governance and remembering what it means to have a sense of class when it comes to being a leader in this country, when it comes to being in a leadership position. It's time for us to remember that just because you have something in your head doesn't mean that you're necessarily allowed to speak your mind, at least if you want a certain level of respect. just because, oh yeah, I love that he just tells it the way he feels. That's not a leadership trait. A leadership trait is knowing when to say something and when not to say something. Or if you are going to be bringing up something that that might be controversial or not well liked, being able to present it in a way that at the very least brings discussion and not straight ire or disgust. It's time for us to remember what class is. Well, it's funny. That sentence. It's truer than I just said. That's the subject for another time. But it's time to remember what it means to truly be a respectable citizen of a republic. This election could be a step in that direction. Time will tell. In order to bring about some real change, there has to be effort from the ground up. There has to be. There also has to be recognition that there are certain people who are taking things way too far. Way too far. And we need to kind of rein it back in. One last thing, which is, I know this is kind of rambly, but I do need to touch on this. It's sort of connected to all of this. To go back to what I said before about people acting a bit unhinged now that the election went the way it did. You really need to start paying attention to how people act in situations to see what they're really like. Forget words. Words are next to meaningless if their actions don't match them. In fact, they are pretty much meaningless, except for seeing how far they're going to be willing to go to lie about what their positions are, or how much they want to try to project their own faults onto other people. I think conservatives have to recognize and admit that there are people in their camp who represent some of the worst aspects of our natures and who are embracing some absolutely reprehensible ideas. Thankfully, I'm seeing that. I have been noticing in, different, conservative pundits and writers and even people in politics who are now saying, okay, this is insane. Now, even the Republican Party in California right now is basically saying that the main reason why they can't win over there is because they are connected to Trump. That right there is an and they're even saying we need to distance ourselves from him and his brand of politics and the people who are associated with him if we want to even begin to get close to governing again. That's a big thing to admit. But it does give me some hope for the future. Some. Yeah, I can't say I don't have my own faults. I know I'm a bit of a pessimist, but can you blame me? But yeah, I'm going to end it off right here. I think I've rambled enough, but yeah. Glad to see the way the election went, but it's interesting to see how people are responding, and I'm hoping that this election will be treated as a first step, or at least a good beginning step, and not as the end of the fight, as it usually tends to be in this country. Time will tell. Anyway, that's it. Catch you guys later.